I came home to a nightmare that could only be cooked up by the twisted minds of Green Valley Estate HOA. My farm animals, 3 goats named Mo, Larry, and Curly, plus 6 chickens who clucked like they were auditioning for a barnyard musical, were gone, vanished. In their place, a smug little notice pinned to my barn door, flapping in the Iowa breeze like a taunting middle finger, removed for violating HOA Rule 8.2 no livestock allowed. Oh, and the kicker. They didn't just take my animals, they euthanized them. That's right. Karen White and her clipboard-wielding goon squad sent my furry and feathered friends to the great barnyard in the sky. Big mistake, Karen. They didn't know I'm Tom Harrison, Iowa's State Agriculture Director, and they just poked a bear with a pitchfork. Let me set the scene. I'm Tom, 50 years old, a guy who spent his life elbow deep in Iowa's agricultural heartbeat. I run the state's Department of Agriculture, which means I know more about livestock laws than Karen knows about passive-aggressive emails. My home in Green Valley Estates, a semi-rural slice of Iowa paradise, is my sanctuary. It's got a modest farmhouse, a barn that's seen better days, and a small hobby farm where my goats and chickens lived their best lives. The goats were my pride and joy. Mo had a beard that could shame a hipster. Larry was always plotting his next escape, and Curly just loved headbutting anything that moved. The chickens. They laid eggs so perfect you'd think they were crafted by a jeweler. This wasn't just a hobby, it was my roots, my peace, my middle finger to a world gone soft. Green Valley Estate sounds idyllic, right? Rolling hills, big lots, a place where you can breathe free. Except for one thing, the HOA. These folks make the DMV look like a comedy club, led by Karen White, a woman who treats her HOA presidency like she's ruling a small dictatorship. They've been tightening the screws for years. Vegetable gardens banned, too unkempt. Unapproved paint colors. Fined faster than you can say, veg. My neighbor Tom got slapped with a 50 penalty for his offensive garden gnomes. And Lisa down the road was told her backyard chickens were a health hazard. Karen's got a rule book thicker than a phone book, and a smile so smug it could curdle milk. Her sidekick Dave is the muscle. Picture a guy who thinks cargo shorts and a citation pad make him James Bond. So there I was, pulling into my driveway after a long day of meetings about corn yields and hog regulations. It's 2025, the sun's setting over the Iowa hills, and I'm ready to toss some grain to my critters and crack a beer. But something's off. The usual cacophony of clucks and bleats is gone. Silence. My barn looks like it's been hit by a sweat team. The chicken coop is empty, the goat pen's gate swings sadly in the wind, and that damn notice is staring me down. I rip it off the door, my hands shaking. Removed for violating OA Rule 8.2 no livestock allowed. Animals have been relocated for community safety. Relocated. I call the number on the notice, and after 20 minutes of hold music that sounds like a cat in a blender, I get Dave. Where are my animals, Dave? I growl, trying not to lose it. They were, in violation, Tom. He stammers, clearly reading from Karen's script. We had to act fast. They're gone. Gone where? My voice is low, dangerous, euthanized. He mumbles like it's no big deal. Public health, you know. I hang up before I say something that'd get me arrested. Euthanized. My goats who'd nibble your hand like it was a 5-star buffet. My chickens, who'd strut around like they owned the place. Dead. Because Karen and her power trip decided they were a threat to her pristine vision of Green Valley. I'm not just mad. I'm volcanic. But here's the thing, Karen doesn't know who she's messing with. I'm not just some guy with a pitchfork. I'm the guy who writes the laws her pitchfork's subject to. Now let's talk realism, because this is where it gets juicy. HOAs can ban livestock, sure. Lots of communities have rules about no cows or pigs cluttering up the cul-de-sac. But euthanizing animals without owner consent, that's not just cruel. It's a legal landmine. Iowa's got agricultural protection laws that smile on small-scale farming, especially in semi-rural areas like Green Valley. My 3 goats and 6 chickens weren't disturbing anyone. They weren't crapping on Karen's lawn or crowing at 3 a.m. The euthanization is so far over the line, it's practically in Nebraska. And the fact that I got no warning, no appeal, no chance to save my animals. That's not just bad manners. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Karen's reign of terror isn't new. She's been flexing her HOA muscles for years, turning Green Valley into her personal fiefdom. She once tried to fine me because my truck, parked in my own driveway, was unapproved for being too rural. I laughed it off then, but this is war. Karen's got her clipboard, her rule book, and her sanctimonious smirk. But I've got something better: the law, a network of pissed off neighbors, and a burning desire to see her crash and burn. So what's next? I'm not just gonna roll over and let Karen White euthanize my life's joy. I'm digging into Rule 8.2, rallying the troops, and using every ounce of my agriculture director clout to make her regret this. Have you ever had an HOA ruin your day over something ridiculous? Drop your worst HOA horror stories in the comments. Are you watching this on your phone, TV, or laptop? Let me know where you're from and what time it is there. This is Tom Harrison, and I'm about to turn Karen's rulebook into confetti. Stay tuned. When a bureaucrat meets a bureaucrat, who wins? Spoiler, it's the one with the bigger rulebook and a grudge the size of Iowa. After Karen White and her HOA goon squad euthanized my goats and chickens, I wasn't just mad, I was a one-man volcano ready to erupt. I'm Tom Harrison, State Agriculture Director, and my little hobby farm in Green Valley Estates was my sanctuary until Karen's clipboard crusade turned it into a pet cemetery. Rule 8.2. That vague, no livestock nonsense was her weapon, but I was about to turn her precious OA bylaws into a comedy roast. She thought she'd won. Oh, Karen, you've just stepped into the ring with a guy who knows every agricultural law from here to Des Moines. First, I needed to understand the battlefield. I grabbed a beer, sat at my kitchen table, and cracked open the Green Valley Estates OA handbook, a tome so dense it could double as a doorstop. Rule 8.2 stared back at me. No livestock permitted on residential properties. That's it. No definition of livestock. No mention of scale, no criteria for enforcement. It was vaguer than a politician's promise. My 3 goats, Mo, Larry, and Curly, weren't exactly a cattle ranch. My 6 chickens weren't staging a coup in Karen's petunias. This rule was a blank check, and Karen was cashing it with a smirk. I started digging deeper, fueled by rage and a second beer. The HOA's been on a power trip lately, and I wasn't the only victim. My neighbor Tom, a retired mechanic with a heart of gold, got fined $100 for his unsightly garden gnomes. Those cheerful little bastards Karen claimed were lowering property values. Lisa, a single mom down the road, had her backyard chickens banned because Karen said they attracted vermin. Vermin. The only pest in Green Valley is Karen's ego. I began to suspect this wasn't just about my animals. Karen had a vendetta, and I was a prime target ever since she tried to fine me for my unapproved truck. Apparently, my beat-up F-150 was too rural for her suburban utopia. Lady, we're in Iowa. Cornfields outnumber people here. I decided to play detective, and let me tell you, I was born for this. Picture me in a fedora, except it's a John Deere cap, and my trench coat is a flannel shirt. First stop, the HOA's public records, which they're legally required to share. Getting them was like pulling teeth from a tractor. Dave, Karen's citation, pad-wielding sidekick, hemmed and hawed, claiming the records were on storage. Sure, Dave. And my goats are on vacation in Maui. After threatening to file a formal complaint with the state, I got the files boxes of poorly organized papers that smelled like regret and cheap coffee. What I found was a goldmine of incompetence. Meeting minutes showed Karen running OA gatherings like a cult leader. Residents spoke in hushed tones, terrified of her wrath. One entry noted Mrs. Jenkins apologizing for her unauthorized rose bushes. Rose bushes! Karen's notes were littered with phrases like maintaining community standards and upholding aesthetic integrity, which is code for I hate anything that doesn't bow to me. The humor in these meetings was unintentional but glorious. One resident asked if they could paint their mailbox blue, and Karen responded, "Blue is not an approved color per Appendix C, Section 4.2. I laughed so hard I spilled my beer. I've seen tax codes with less control freak energy, but the real kicker, Rule 8.2 had never been properly voted on. HOA bylaws require a majority resident vote for new rules, but 8.2 was slipped in during a special meeting, with only Karen, Dave, and 2 board members present. That's not a meeting. That's a conspiracy over potluck casserole. This was my first weapon. The rule itself was shakier than a scarecrow in a tornado. Next, I called up my buddy Mike at the Department of Agriculture's legal team. Mike's the kind of guy who can recite livestock laws like poetry. I told him about the euthanization, and he nearly choked on his coffee. "Tom, they did what? Without notice or consent. That's not just unethical. It's illegal. Iowa's agricultural protection laws are clear. Small-scale farming in semi-rural areas is protected, and seizing or destroying animals without due process is a violation." Mike confirmed that my goats and chickens didn't qualify as livestock. Under state law, they were more like pets with benefits, eggs, and entertainment. Karen's move wasn't just a power trip, it was a legal dumpster fire. I started rallying the troops. I knocked on Tom's door, and he greeted me with a grin and a gnome holding a tiny middle finger, his subtle rebellion. "Tom, you in for taking down Karen?" I asked. His eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas. Lisa was next, still fuming about her chickens. "She told me my hens were a public health crisis," Lisa said, rolling her eyes. "My kids love those birds. We formed a ragtag resistance, think the Avengers but with pitchforks and a grudge." The more we talked, the more it felt personal. Karen's vendetta against me wasn't just about my farm. She'd been gunning for anyone who didn't fit her vision of Green Valley as a sterile suburb. My truck, my animals, my whole rural vibe were a thorn in her side. I remembered her snide comment at last year's HOA picnic. "Tom, maybe you'd be happier in a real farm town." "Oh, Karen, you're about to learn I'm plenty happy right here, especially when I'm dismantling your empire." Humor kept us sane. Tom joked that Karen's next rule would ban laughter for being too disruptive. Lisa quipped that Karen's rule book was her precious, and we all did our best Gollum impressions. I added, "I've seen cult leaders with less control over their followers." We laughed, but the truth stung. Karen's HOA was a machine, and we were cogs she wanted to crush. By the end of the week I had a plan. The vague rule, the illegal euthanization, and Karen's iron grip were my targets. I'd use my agriculture director clout to hit her where it hurt the law. But first, I needed more dirt. I had a hunch Karen wasn't just a control freak. She was up to something bigger. Time to keep digging, and maybe leak a little chaos to the local news. Karen's reign was about to get a reality check. Time to bring out the big guns, literally and figuratively. Okay, maybe not literally, unless you count my righteous fury as a cannon. I'm Tom Harrison. I was State Agriculture Director, and after Karen White's OA death squad euthanized my goats and chickens, I was done playing nice. Green Valley Estates was her kingdom, but I was about to storm the castle with a legal battering ram and a smirk. Rule 8.2, that flimsy no livestock excuse, was just the tip of Karen's tyrannical iceberg. I'd already sniffed out her shaky rule, making and cult leader vibes, but now I was building a case to make her regret ever picking up a clipboard. My kitchen table looked like a war room, littered with HOA records, empty coffee mugs, and a half-eaten bag of corn chips. Step 1. Confirm the euthanization was as illegal as it was heartless. I called my legal team at the Department of Agriculture, led by Sarah, a lawyer who could make a statute sound like a battle cry. "Tom, this is a slam dunk," she said, her voice crackling with glee. "Euthanizing your animals without notice or consent violates Iowa Code 700.2, Animal Neglect and Abuse Protections. Plus, your goats and chickens don't even count as livestock. under state law for a small-scale operation like yours. I could hear her flipping through papers. The HOA's liable for damages and Karen could face criminal charges. Criminal charges? Oh, Karen, your rulebook's about to meet a jail cell. Sarah dug deeper and found that Green Valley's semi-rural zoning explicitly allows small-scale agriculture. My 3 goats, Mo, Larry, and Curly, and 6 chickens were as legal as apple pie. Karen's public health excuse was thinner than her yoga mat smile. This wasn't just a win. It was a guillotine for her HOA reign. I leaned back in my chair, picturing Karen's face when she realized she'd messed with the wrong bureaucrat. But I wasn't stopping at the animals. Karen's HOA was a house of cards, and I had a leaf blower. Those public records I'd pried from Dave's sweaty hands revealed a financial scandal that made my jaw drop. Karen had been using OA funds like her personal piggy bank, $500 for a deluxe ergonomic office chair, $200 for board meeting catering, pretty fancy for stale donuts, and $1,000 for consulting fees, to a company called KW Enterprises. Guess who owned KW Enterprises? Yep, Karen White. It was so blatant I almost admired her audacity. Almost. This was my second weapon: financial mismanagement. OAs are supposed to be transparent, but Karen's books were shadier than a cornfield at midnight. I cross-referenced the records with state laws on nonprofit organizations. HOAs fall under this in Iowa, and her spending was a textbook violation. Misusing dues could get her booted from the board faster than you can say, audit. I chuckled, imagining Karen trying to explain her 500 chair to a judge. Your Honor, my lumber support is a community asset. Time to rally the troops. I called a secret meeting at Tom's garage, where his rebellious garden gnomes stood guard like tiny sentinels. Tom, still stinging from his 100 gnome fine, was all in. Karen's gonna wish she'd stuck to knitting, he growled, polishing a gnome's pointy hat. Lisa, whose backyard chickens were banished by Karen's vermin decree, brought her kids drawings of their lost hens. Heartbreaking ammo for our cause. We were joined by Mrs. Jenkins, whose unauthorized rose bushes had earned her a 75 fine, and Bob, a quiet guy whose unapproved basketball hoop got him a cease and desist letter. Karen had turned Green Valley into a police state, and we were the resistance. Our strategy session was half war council, half comedy roast. Tom joked that Karen's next rule would ban breathing without a permit. Gotta regulate oxygen for aesthetic integrity, he said, mimicking her nasal tone. Lisa laughed so hard she snorted. At this rate, she'll outlaw sunlight for being too bright. I added. She'd probably fine the sun for loitering. The humor kept us sharp, but our anger was the fuel. We documented every violation, fines, threats, and Karen's petty power plays. Lisa snapped photos of her pristine chicken coop to prove it wasn't a health hazard. Bob pulled receipts for his hoop, showing he'd followed every installation guideline. We were building a dossier thicker than Karen's rulebook. My next move was pure chaos. I leaked Karen's financial shenanigans to the local news. I knew a reporter, Jenna, at the Green Valley Gazette, who loved a juicy scoop. I slid her the records anonymously. Okay, I used a burner email. Tom called me 1007 for a week. By morning, the headlines screamed, Green Valley O president accused of misusing funds. Jenna's article detailed the 500 chair, the sketchy consulting fees, and quotes from concerned residents. Yours truly incognito. Social media lit up. Neighbors I didn't even know were posting about Karen's reign of terror. One guy tweeted, Karen White's chair costs more than my car. Fade irony. I cackled, picturing Karen's face as her inbox exploded. The leak was a calculated strike. Karen's board meetings were already tense, and this would make her sweat like a pig in a bacon factory. But I wasn't done. I drafted a formal complaint to the State Agriculture Department, citing the illegal euthanization and Rule 8.2's vagueness. Sarah helped me polish it into a legal missile, complete with citations and a demand for an investigation. I also prepped for the HOA meeting where I'd confront Karen publicly. My allies, Tom, Lisa, Mrs. Jenkins, and Bob were ready to back me up, each with their own grievances. We were a motley crew, but we had the law, the truth, and a whole lot of pent-up rage. Karen thought she'd crushed me when she took my animals. She didn't realize she'd lit a fuse. I was no longer just Tom, the guy with the goats. I was Tom, the agriculture director with a vendetta, a legal team, and a growing army of pissed-off neighbors. The HOA meeting was coming, and I was ready to drop a bombshell that'd make Karen's clipboard tremble. She'd built her empire on petty fines and powered trips, but I was about to tear it down with a smile. Stay tuned, Green Valley. This bureaucrat's just getting started. When the agriculture director meets the HOA, sparks fly, or in this case, clipboards crash and burn. I'm Tom Harrison, I was state agriculture director, and after Karen White's HOA goons euthanized my beloved goats and chickens, I'd built a case tighter than a combine harvester's bolts. Green Valley Estates was Karen's fiefdom, but her vague Rule 8.2, illegal animal executions, and shady financial dealings were about to get a public flogging. The HOA meeting was my coliseum, and I was ready to unleash the lions, figuratively of course, though I wouldn't have minded seeing Karen face a real one. The community center was packed, a sweaty mix of nervous neighbors and Karen loyalists clutching their HOA handbooks like holy relics. The air smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Karen sat at the head table, her signature clipboard gleaming under fluorescent lights, her smile as fake as a plastic scarecrow. Dave, her citation pad sidekick, fidgeted beside her, looking like a man who just realized his cargo shorts weren't bulletproof. My posse, Tom, Lisa, Mrs. Jenkins, and Bob, flanked me in the front row, our dossier of evidence tucked into a folder I'd labeled Karen's Karma. The Green Valley Gazette's leak about her 500 office chair had already set the room buzzing, and I could feel the tension like a storm rolling over the plains. Karen banged her gavel, because of course she had a gavel, and called the meeting to order with the pomp of a wannabe dictator. We're here to discuss community standards, she began, her voice dripping with sanctimony. Despite recent misinformation in the press, our HOA remains committed to aesthetic integrity. Misinformation. Oh, Karen, you're about to eat those words with a side of crow. I stood up, folder in hand, and the room went quieter than a cornfield at midnight. I'd like to address the board, I said, my tone calm but sharp enough to cut through her nonsense. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she couldn't refuse me without looking like she was dodging. Go ahead, Mr. Harrison, she said, her smile tighter than her yoga pants. I started with the euthanization, laying out the facts like a farmer spreading seed. On March 15, my 3 goats and 6 chickens were removed from my property without notice or consent, then euthanized citing Rule 8.2. No livestock allowed. This was not only cruel but illegal under Iowa Code 717B2, which protects animals from abuse and requires due process. I held up a photo of Mo, Larry, and Curly, their bearded faces staring soulfully at the crowd. Jenkins sniffled audibly. These weren't livestock. They were pets, legal under state law for semi-rural zoning like Green Valley. Karen tried to interrupt, but I steamrolled on. Rule 8.2 itself is invalid. HOA bylaws require a majority resident vote for new rules, but 8.2 was passed in a special meeting, with only 4 people present. That's not a vote, it's a coffee clatch. A few neighbors chuckled, and Karen's face turned the color of overripe beets. I wasn't done. Worse, the euthanization violates state agricultural protections. I've filed a complaint with the Department of Agriculture, and they're investigating as we speak. The room erupted in whispers, and Dave looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Then I dropped the financial bomb. Let's talk about HOA funds, I said, pulling out copies of the records I'd leaked to the Gazette. Karen, care to explain the 500 deluxe ergonomic chair, paid for with our dues, or the $1,000 to KW Enterprises, a company you own? I slid the documents across the table, and the board members' eyes widened like they'd just seen a tractor crash. This is textbook mismanagement under Iowa's nonprofit laws. Misuse of funds can lead to removal from the board and legal consequences. Karen's composure cracked like a dry corn husk.
This is outrageous,
she sputtered, slamming her clipboard down. You're a troublemaker, Tom, stirring up lies to undermine our community. Her voice hit a pitch that could shatter glass. I leaned forward, grinning. Troublemaker. Karen, my goats were cleaner than your financial records. The room exploded in laughter, even from some of her loyalists. Dave tried to back her up, mumbling about public health and community standards, but he tripped over his words so badly it sounded like he was reciting a bad poem. Public health. I shot back. My chickens laid eggs you could have served at a 5-star brunch. Your health crisis excuse is as flimsy as your rule book. The board members were shifting in their seats, avoiding Karen's glare. One of them, a nervous guy named Steve, finally spoke up. Karen, can you address the financial allegations? The crowd leaned in, and I swear I heard popcorn crunching somewhere. Karen's defense was a masterclass in self-destruction. The chair was necessary for administrative efficiency, she insisted, and KW Enterprises provided essential consulting services. Consulting? For what? How to find rose bushes. The crowd wasn't buying it. Lisa stood up, holding her kids' drawings of their lost chickens. You called my hens a health hazard, but your consulting is robbing us blind. Tom chimed in, waving a garden gnome photo. My gnomes didn't hurt anyone, but your fines are killing our spirit. The room roared with applause, and Karen looked like she'd been hit by a hay bale. I sealed the deal with a warning. Karen, the state's investigation will confirm these violations. Step down now, or face a lawsuit that'll make your 500 chair look like pocket change. The board members exchanged panicked glances, and Steve whispered something to the others. Karen's clipboard trembled in her hands, her empire crumbling faster than a stale cornbread muffin. The humor was my secret weapon. Every jab, about her chair, her rulebook, her consulting scam, landed like a well-aimed pitchfork. The crowd's laughter wasn't just amusement, it was rebellion. Karen had ruled through fear, but I was turning her into a punchline. As the meeting adjourned in chaos, neighbors swarmed me, sharing their own HOA horror stories. "She fined me for my dog's bark," one said.
My mailbox was too shiny,
said another. Green Valley was waking up and Karen's throne was wobbling. The confrontation wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of her downfall. The state's investigation was closing in, and my allies were ready for the final push. Karen thought she could bully me into submission, but she'd unleashed a bureaucrat with a vendetta and a knack for making her look ridiculous. The next act was coming, and I was ready to serve justice with a side of satire. Revenge is a dish best served with a side of justice, and I was about to plate up a feast that'd make Karen White choke on her own rulebook. I'm Tom Harrison, Iowa's State Agriculture Director, and after Karen's OA death squad euthanized my goats and chickens, I turned Green Valley Estates into her personal Waterloo. The HOA meeting had been a bloodbath. Metaphorically, though, I wouldn't have minded seeing her clipboard snap in half. With Rule 8.2 exposed as a sham, her financial scams laid bare, and the state breathing down her neck, Karen's empire was crumbling. But I wasn't done. The payoff was coming, and it was sweeter than fresh, churned butter. The state's investigation moved faster than a combine at harvest time. A week after the meeting, the Iowa Department of Agriculture dropped a report that read like a legal spanking. The euthanization of my goats, Mo, Larry, and Curly, and my 6 chickens violated Iowa Code 7 Funson B.2, which protects animals from abuse and demands due process. The report confirmed my animals weren't livestock. Under state law, they were small-scale agricultural treasures, as legal as a barn dance. Karen's public health excuse was dismissed as baseless and reckless. The cherry on top, the state found her actions potentially criminal, recommending a deeper probe that had her sweating like a hog in July. But the state didn't stop at my animals. They dug into the HOA's records, thanks to my leaked financial dirt, and found a cesspool of mismanagement. Karen's 500 ergonomic chair won Salziter's consulting fees, to her own KW Enterprises, and other frivolous expenses breached Iowa's nonprofit laws governing HOAs. The report called for her immediate removal from the board and hinted at restitution for affected residents. The Green Valley Gazette ran a front-page story titled, "HO President's Reign Ends in Scandal," with a photo of Karen looking like she'd just swallowed a lemon. Social media erupted. Neighbors posted memes of clipboards in jail cells, and one genius captioned her chair, "The Throne of Tyranny." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. The HOA board, now a flock of nervous chickens themselves, called an emergency meeting. Karen didn't show. Rumor had it she was indisposed, probably hiding under her overpriced chair. The board voted unanimously to remove her, citing gross misconduct. Then, in a move that felt like Christmas morning, they voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. Green Valley Estates was done with Karen's dystopian playbook. In its place, they formed a voluntary community association with a simple mission: keep the streets clean and let people live. No fines for gnomes, no bans on chickens, no clipboard crusades. I stood in the back, grinning like a kid who just won the county fair. The state didn't just slap Karen's wrist, they handed me a victory lap. I was compensated for my animals, $2,500 for the goats and chickens, plus $100,000 for emotional distress. I didn't care about the money, it was the principle. My farm was greenlit to continue, as long as I kept it within state regs easy. I wasn't planning a cattle ranch. I bought 3 new goats, named Justice, Liberty, and Freedom, because I'm petty like that, and a fresh flock of chickens that clucked with revolutionary zeal. My barn was alive again, and every bleat felt like a middle finger to Karen. Then came the twist, the kind of bombshell that makes you cackle at fate's sense of humor. While sifting through the HOA's final records, Tom uncovered a paper trail that blew our minds. Karen had been secretly negotiating with a developer to sell Green Valley to a big shot firm planning to turn our semi-rural paradise into a cookie-cutter suburb. Think strip malls and zero-lot line houses. Her strict rules, from banning my animals to finding Tom's gnomes, were designed to drive out residents like us who valued our freedom and roots. She'd been playing a long game, using her HOA power to make the community sellable by purging anyone who didn't fit her sterile vision. I wasn't about to let that happen. As agriculture director, I had pull with state zoning boards, and I used it like a sledgehammer. I lobbied to reinforce Green Valley's semi-rural status, citing Iowa's agricultural heritage laws. The developer's plan was scrapped faster than Karen's credibility, and Green Valley stayed a haven for folks who like their space and their chickens. Karen's dream of cashing out was dead, and I couldn't help but smile imagining her fuming in her ergonomic chair. Karen's final act was peak pettiness. A handwritten note slipped under my door that read, "Enjoy your smelly farm." I laughed, framed it, and hung it in my barn next to a photo of my new goats. It was a trophy, proof I'd outlasted her. Rumor had it she'd moved to a condo in Des Moines, where she was already terrorizing her new neighbors with complaints about unauthorized welcome mats. Good luck, Des Moines, you'll need it. The humor was my armor through it all. Karen's downfall was a comedy of errors. Her chair, her consulting scam, her flimsy excuses. At the community association's first meeting, Tom brought a gnome wearing a tiny crown labeled Karen's nemesis, and we all roared. Lisa joked that we should name a chicken after Karen, but it'd lay rotten eggs. I quipped, her rulebook's the only thing that deserves euthanizing. The laughter wasn't just catharsis, it was our rebellion against her reign of terror. Green Valley was free, and it felt like the air was cleaner. Neighbors started planting vegetable gardens, painting mailboxes wild colors, and yes, bringing back chickens. Tom's gnomes multiplied like a ceramic army, and Mrs. Jenkins' rose bushes bloomed defiantly. I stood in my barn, tossing grain to justice, liberty, and freedom, and felt a peace I hadn't known since before Karen's raid. This was my home, my roots, my victory. So, if you've ever fought an HOA, share your victory stories below. What's the craziest rule you've faced? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Iowa, Timbuktu, or somewhere in between. This is Tom Harrison, signing off with a bleat and a cluck, proof that even a bureaucrat can win when the stakes are personal and the goats are on your side.